The brass house key felt heavier than it should have in my palm. Next to it on my kitchen counter sat a locksmith receipt for $847. Every deadbolt, every window lock, every entry point to my home changed in a single afternoon. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother. "Jessica, I'm coming over tomorrow to get my key back. This nonsense ends now." I stared at that message for a long time, because what my mother didn't know was that her key, the one she'd been secretly copying and distributing to family members behind my back, wouldn't work anymore. I'm Jessica Chen, 34 years old. I work as a financial analyst here in Portland, Oregon, and I've spent the last 6 months discovering that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. The house key in my hand wasn't just metal and brass. It was proof that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones planning to take everything you've worked for. If you want to know what happened next, keep listening. To understand how we got here, you need to know about my sister, Amanda. Growing up, she was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, who got bailed out of every mistake, who never had to face real consequences. I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades, worked part-time jobs in high school, saved money for college. While Amanda was partying her way through 3 different universities on my parents' dime, I was building a career in finance. When I was 28, I found this house, a 1940s craftsman that needed work but had good bones. My dad helped me with the down payment, but I paid him back every cent within 2 years. The mortgage, the renovations, the property taxes, all mine. "You're so practical, Jess," my mom used to say. But there was always something in her tone that made it sound like an insult. My dad was different. He'd come over on weekends to help with projects, and he'd always say the same thing. "This place is really yours, kiddo. You earned it." I remember the last time he said that. We were installing new kitchen cabinets, and he was holding the level while I marked the wall. "Promise me something," he said. "Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about what you've built here." I thought he was talking about general life advice. I had no idea he was trying to warn me. But before I continue, I need to tell you about how this house truly became mine. It wasn't just a simple purchase. It was a 3-year process that showed exactly who I was versus who Amanda was. When I first started house hunting, Amanda laughed at me. "Jess, you're 28 years old. Why don't you just rent a nice apartment instead of burying yourself in debt?" But I had a plan. I'd been saving for 5 years, working 2 jobs through college and living with roommates even after I graduated. While Amanda was spending her entire paycheck every month on clothes and trips, I was putting 40% of my income into a savings account. The house I found was in a transitional neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but I could see the potential. The inspector found some issues. Old plumbing, wiring that needed updating, a roof that would need replacing in a few years. Most people would have run. I saw an opportunity. I negotiated the price down by $15,000 because of the needed repairs. Then I spent the next 2 years learning how to do renovations from YouTube. Weekends, evenings, holidays. I was there with a drill or a wrench. Dad loved it. He'd show up Saturday mornings with coffee and donuts, ready to help with whatever project I had planned. "You remind me of myself," he'd say, always seeing what something could become, not just what it is right now. Amanda, on the other hand, visited maybe twice a year. "It's looking nice, Jess," she'd say, but I could tell she didn't get it. To her, a house was just a place to live. To me, it was proof that I could build something lasting. When I finished paying Dad back 2 years later, he insisted on having a little ceremony. He brought over a bottle of champagne and an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "The deed," he said. "Officially transferred to your name only. No co-signers, no outstanding loans. It's 100% yours." I remember holding those papers and feeling something I'd never felt before. Security, stability, proof that hard work actually mattered. "Why are you doing this now?" I asked. Dad was quiet for a moment. "Because I want to make sure no one can ever take this away from you." not even family. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I know he was being prophetic. Dad had his heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. The funeral was a blur, but the will reading 2 weeks later, that's when things got interesting. Dad had been more thorough than any of us expected. Amanda got his life insurance policy, which was substantial. Mom got the retirement accounts and their joint savings. But the house, my house, was officially transferred to me, free and clear. No more mortgage. "I don't understand," Mom said to the lawyer. "Why would he do that? The house should go to both girls equally." "Mrs. Chen," the lawyer explained patiently, "your husband was very specific. Jessica has been the sole owner since 2019. This document simply ensures that ownership can't be contested." I saw something flicker across Mom's face that I'd never seen before. It wasn't grief. It was calculation. "Well," she said, forcing a smile, "I guess that means I'll be staying with you for a while, honey. Just until I figure out my next steps." That's when I realized what this was really about. But before Mom moved in, there was a conversation that should have alerted me. 3 days after the funeral, she called me. "Jessica, dear, we need to talk about practical arrangements." "Of course, Mom. What do you need?" "Well, I'm going to need a key to the house. And maybe we should add my name to the utilities account, just to make things easier." Something in her tone bothered me. "Mom, you said this was temporary." Of course. But you know how these things go. It might take a few months for me to find the right place. And frankly, after losing your father, I don't know if I'm ready to live alone. I should have trusted my instincts in that moment. Instead, I let guilt do the talking. "Of course, Mom. You can stay as long as you need." Those words would come back to haunt me. Mom moved in 3 days later with 2 suitcases and a lot of opinions about my house. "This kitchen is so dark," she'd say. "We should knock out this wall. The guest room needs new carpet, something warmer. I think we should convert the garage into a proper living space." We. She kept saying we. When I gently reminded her that this was temporary, she'd get this wounded look. "Jessica, I just lost my husband. I thought my daughter would want to take care of me." The guilt trip started small. Comments about how lonely she was, how she never thought she'd be a burden to her children, how Dad would have wanted us to stick together. But then she started making changes without asking. New curtains in the living room, different soap in the bathrooms. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets to be more efficient. "Mom," I said one evening, "we need to talk about boundaries." "Boundaries?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Honey, this is family. We don't need boundaries." That's when I noticed she'd had copies of my house key made. I found them in her purse when I was looking for aspirin. 3 identical copies on a ring with a tag that said spares. But that wasn't even the worst part. I started noticing other things. My mail was being opened and resealed. Documents in my home office were in slightly different positions. My laptop had browsing history I didn't remember making. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of low voices coming from the kitchen. I crept downstairs and saw Mom on the phone. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," she was whispering. "Yes, I have access to everything. We just need to be patient." I went back to my room without making a sound, but I couldn't sleep. Who was on the other end of that line? And what were they being patient about? The family group chat started buzzing the next week. Amanda, my cousin Mike, my Aunt Sarah, suddenly everyone had opinions about my situation with Mom. Amanda: "Jess, Mom says you're being really cold to her." Mike: "She's grieving, cuz. Cut her some slack." Aunt Sarah: "Your mother raised you girls. The least you can do is let her live in peace." I stared at these messages, feeling like I was in an alternate universe. When had taking care of my own home become a family emergency? Then Amanda called me directly. Look, Jess, I get that it's your house legally, but morally, Mom has just as much right to be there as you do. She helped Dad with that down payment, which I paid back, I said, with interest. That's not the point. The point is family loyalty. But that wasn't even the worst part. I found out Amanda had been telling people that I was trying to kick Mom out onto the street, that I was being selfish and ungrateful, that I was acting like Dad's death was an opportunity to get rid of Mom. The story had gotten so twisted that when I ran into our old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, at the grocery store, she actually scolded me. "Your poor mother," she said, shaking her head. "After everything she's been through, and her own daughter won't even let her stay in the family home." I realized then that this wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about my reputation, my relationships, my place in my own community. But the thing that really bothered me was a conversation I overheard. Mom was in the front yard talking to Mrs. Patterson, and I was at the kitchen window. "It's so difficult," Mom was saying. "Jessica was always jealous of the attention Amanda got. I think she sees this as her chance to punish me." "Oh dear," Mrs. Patterson said. "I'm sure she'll get over it." I hope so. But between you and me, I'm starting to worry about her mental stability. The stress of her father's death, you know. Sometimes she acts so irrationally. I stood there, listening to my own mother question my sanity to a neighbor. It was a deliberate strategy to make any resistance from me look like evidence of instability. 3 months after Mom moved in, I got a call from my mortgage company. "Ms. Chen, we received some paperwork indicating a change in property ownership. We need to verify some details with you." My blood went cold. "What kind of paperwork?" "A power of attorney document giving your mother authority to make decisions about the property. She's requesting to add her name to the deed." I was at work, sitting in my cubicle, and I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "I never signed any power of attorney," I said. "The signature looks legitimate, and it's notarized, but we're required to confirm with you directly before processing any changes." I hung up and immediately called my bank. Same story. Someone had been making inquiries about my accounts, claiming to have legal authority to access them. When I got home that night, Mom was in the kitchen making dinner like nothing had happened. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. "Interesting," I said. "I got some calls about paperwork I never signed." She paused, just for a second, but I caught it. "I don't know what you mean." "Power of attorney documents, with my signature on them." She turned around then, and her expression was completely different, colder, more focused. "Jessica, I think you're confused. Maybe the stress of everything is getting to you." That's when I realized what this was really about. This wasn't grief. This wasn't family loyalty. This was a calculated plan to take my house, and it had been in motion since the day Dad died. But then something didn't add up. I found a voicemail on my phone from 2 weeks earlier that I'd somehow missed. It was from a debt collection agency, asking for Linda Chen. I called them back. "We're trying to reach Mrs. Chen about an outstanding balance of $47,000 from Pacific Casino Resort. She listed this address as her residence. $47,000 in gambling debts." Suddenly, everything made sense. I called my dad's lawyer, the one who'd handled the will. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need to ask you something. Did my father ever mention anything about my mother having financial problems?" There was a long pause. "Jessica, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your father came to see me about 6 months before he died. He was worried about your mother's spending habits. That's why he was so specific about the house. He wanted to make sure you'd always have security." The pieces were falling into place. The forged power of attorney, the locksmith, the real estate agent. Mom wasn't just trying to live in my house. She was trying to sell it to pay off her debts. But there was more. I started digging deeper and found that the gambling debts were just the tip of the iceberg. Mom had been opening credit cards in her and Dad's names during the last years of his life. There were personal loans that Dad probably didn't even know existed. The total amount? Over $80,000 in debt that she'd hidden from the family. Thanksgiving was always at my house. It was tradition. Dad had loved hosting, and after he died, everyone assumed we'd continue. I should have canceled. But I wanted to see how far this would go. Mom had been acting normal all week, chatting about menu planning and who was bringing what. Amanda was flying in from Seattle. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Bob were driving down from Vancouver. What I didn't expect was the locksmith van in my driveway when I got home from work on Wednesday. I parked behind it and walked up to my front door, where a guy in coveralls was drilling out my deadbolt. "Excuse me?" I said. "What are you doing?" "Lock change," he said, not looking up. "Lady inside said the keys got lost." The lady inside. My mother was standing in my doorway, holding a clipboard and looking like she owned the place. "Oh good, you're home," she said. I decided to upgrade the security. These old locks weren't very safe. I looked at the locksmith. "Sir, who hired you for this job?" He checked his clipboard. "Mrs. Linda Chen. She's the homeowner, right?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm the homeowner, and I didn't authorize this work." The locksmith looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, lady, I got a work order and payment. Someone's got to sort this out." Mom stepped forward. "Jessica, don't make a scene. We can discuss this inside." "No," I said. "We can discuss this right here, in front of witnesses." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Mom, for the record, this is my house. I own it. The deed is in my name only. You do not have permission to change my locks." Her mask slipped completely then. "Your house? Your father and I bought this house. You just happened to get your name on some papers." Papers that Dad specifically arranged to protect me from exactly this situation. The locksmith was packing up his tools. I'm not getting in the middle of a family thing. No charge for the service call. As his van pulled away, Mom turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Jessica. This isn't over." "You're right," I said. "It's not." I spent that night gathering evidence. Every text message, every voicemail, every email. I printed bank statements showing my mortgage payments, my property tax payments, every cent I'd put into the house. But the real breakthrough came when I checked my home security system. I'd installed cameras 6 months earlier after some break-ins in the neighborhood, and I'd forgotten they were there. The footage was damning. Mom letting herself into my house when I wasn't home, going through my mail, photographing documents in my home office, meeting with people I didn't recognize, including a man in a suit who turned out to be a real estate agent. But there was more in the footage that shocked me. Mom wasn't just planning to sell my house. She was showing it to potential buyers. There were at least 3 different occasions where she'd given tours of my house to strangers, acting like she was the owner. In one particularly disturbing clip, I heard her tell a couple, "My daughter is going through some personal issues right now, so I'm handling the sale for her. She'll be grateful when it's all sorted out." The audacity was breathtaking. The next morning, I got a call from Amanda. "Jess, we need to talk. I just got off the phone with Mom, and she's saying some crazy things." "What kind of crazy things?" "She wants me to help her prove that Dad was mentally incompetent when he wrote his will. She thinks we can get it overturned and split everything 3 ways. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "Amanda, do you know about the gambling?" "What gambling?" I told her everything. The debt collectors, the security footage, the forged documents. By the time I finished, Amanda was quiet for a long time. "Oh my God," she finally said. "Jess, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. She told me you were being greedy and trying to cut her out of Dad's legacy. She's been playing us against each other this whole time." "What do we do?" That's when I realized the real scope of what was happening. Mom hadn't just targeted me. She'd been manipulating Amanda too, trying to turn her into an ally in a scheme that would have hurt both of us. The forged power of attorney wasn't just about my house. If she'd succeeded in getting control of my property, she could have taken out loans against it, sold it without my knowledge, or used it as collateral for more gambling debts. But here's what she didn't count on. I'd been documenting everything from the beginning, because that's what financial analysts do. We keep records. But there was still one piece of the puzzle missing. How did Mom think she could get away with this? The answer came when I found more documents hidden in her room. She'd consulted with a lawyer. Not a reputable one, but one of those who advertise on late-night TV. He'd told her that if she could establish residency in the house for 6 months and prove financial contribution to the property, she might have a legal claim. That's why she'd been paying some of the utility bills. That's why she'd made those improvements without permission. Every action was calculated to build a case that she was a de facto co-owner. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Establish residency, create evidence of co-ownership, then use forged documents to gain legal control. Once she had that, she could sell the house and use the money to pay off her gambling debts. And if I resisted? Well, she'd already planted seeds about my mental instability with the neighbors. It would be easy to argue that I wasn't competent to make decisions about the property. The court hearing was scheduled for the first week of December. Mom had hired a lawyer and was claiming that Dad's will was invalid due to undue influence, and that she had a right to half the property as his surviving spouse. My lawyer, Sarah Kim, was thorough and calm. We have security footage, bank records, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Your mother's case has no merit. But the real moment came when the judge asked Mom directly about the power of attorney documents. Mrs. Chen, did your daughter sign these documents in your presence? Mom hesitated. She was very upset after her father's death. She may not remember signing them. The signature analysis shows clear evidence of forgery, the judge said, and the notary whose stamp appears on these documents says he never notarized anything for you. But then something unexpected happened. Mom's lawyer asked to approach the bench. Your Honor, he said, my client would like to amend her statement. The judge frowned. Proceed. Mom stood up, and for a moment I thought she was going to confess. Instead, she doubled down. Your Honor, my daughter has been suffering from mental health issues since her father's death. She's been paranoid, accusatory, and frankly, I don't think she's competent to manage a property of this magnitude. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. My lawyer stood up. Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt to deflect attention from Mrs. Chen's crimes. We have extensive evidence of... I'd like to present evidence, I said, standing up. The judge nodded. Proceed, Ms. Chen. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made the night before. It was Mom on the phone with someone, discussing how she could make Jessica look unstable if the case went badly. If I can make it seem like she's having a nervous breakdown, Mom's voice said clearly, the court might give me guardianship of the property. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge's ruling was swift and clear. Restraining order granted. All keys to be returned immediately. Any attempt to enter my property without permission would result in arrest. But the most satisfying part was what happened next. Mrs. Chen, the judge continued, I'm also ordering a full investigation into the forged documents. Falsifying legal papers is a felony in this state. Mom's lawyer whispered something to her, and she went pale. After the hearing, Amanda and I stood on the courthouse steps. I can't believe she was willing to destroy our family over money, Amanda said. She didn't destroy our family, I said. She revealed who she really was. There's a difference. I wish I could say that was the end. 2 weeks after the hearing, Mom made one last attempt. She showed up at my door at 6 a.m., crying and begging to talk. Jessica, please. I made terrible mistakes. But I'm your mother. That has to count for something. Part of me wanted to open the door. Part of me wanted to believe she'd changed, that she finally understood what she'd done. But then I remembered the security footage, the lies to the neighbors, the forged documents, the plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. Mom, I said through the door, you made your choice when you decided my house was worth more than our relationship. Please, Jessica, I'm desperate. The debt collectors are threatening me. Then you should have thought of that before you tried to steal from me. I heard her crying on the other side of the door for a few minutes. Then I heard her footsteps walking away. That was the last time we spoke. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through windows that Mom never got to replace. The house is quiet in a way it never was when she lived here. It's peaceful. Amanda and I are closer now than we've been in years. Turns out, when you stop letting someone manipulate you against each other, you remember why you loved each other in the first place. Mom pleaded guilty to fraud charges and got probation plus community service. She's living in a studio apartment across town and getting help for her gambling addiction. We don't talk much, but Amanda says she's doing better. The debt collectors found her eventually. Turns out, you can't run from $47,000 in casino debt by stealing your daughter's house. Who knew? I learned something important through all of this. The people who love you don't ask you to prove it by giving up everything you've worked for. Real family doesn't use guilt as a weapon, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. The brass key on my counter isn't heavy anymore. It's just a key to a house that's mine, fair and square, just like Dad intended. If you've been through something like this, family members who tried to take advantage of your grief or your generosity, tell me in the comments. What would you have done? And remember, you don't owe anyone access to what you've built, not even family. Especially not family who would destroy it. Sometimes the best inheritance you can give yourself is the courage to protect what's yours.